Welcome to the Progress Texas Happy Hour.
Okay, welcome back to the Progress Texas Happy Hour, everybody. Podcasting Director Chris Mosier here. As we know, election time, election season. We seem to have this same conversation on a regular sort of cyclical basis when it comes time to talk about the two big main courts that oversee things in the great state of Texas. We have not only a Texas state Supreme Court, we also have a Texas Court of Criminal Appeals right up at the top, kind of next to each other, handling different parts of the legal situation and universe here in Texas. It's frankly a topic and a scenario that I have a hard time myself keeping straight in my head. And so I understand, dear listener, if you can't either. And that's why we've amassed a terrific group of 5 folks, all of whom are active in the current judicial system in Texas to various degrees, 4 of whom are running for offices on one or the other of these two top courts in Texas, and another of whom has great experience in this regard. And so we brought her in for, shall we say, moral support, and is also running for her current seat. So we'll get around to everybody. Let's go around the horn, and we're going to start down in what on my screen is the lower left here, Justice Chari Kelly. Hello, Chari. How are you? Coming on for the first time.
Hello. Howdy. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Absolutely. Chari, tell us a little about yourself and why you chose to enter the race. You're running for the Texas Supreme Court.
I am. I'm running for the Texas Supreme Court Place 2, and I currently serve on the Third Court of Appeals, where I've served for 7 years. I was elected in 2018, and I was part of a group of candidates to flip that court from all Republican to a majority Democratic, and now it's all Democratic. I'm a former U.S. Army paratrooper. I'm board certified in judicial administration and criminal law, and I chose to get in this race because it's really time for a change at all levels of our highest courts. It's been a long time since we've had a real shakeup in those courts. They've been solidly Republican for over 20 years. They're majority men, and I think there's a lot of much needed change, because right now it's sort of a homogenous way of thinking over there, and it would be nice to have diversity of experience, diversity of thought, and not just people who've been handpicked by the governor.
Great stuff. And moving on around the horn, Justice Cory Carlyle. Cory is also coming on for the first time here at Progress Texas, also running for the Texas Supreme Court. Hi, Cory.
Well, afternoon. Thanks for having me. I am a board certified lawyer in civil appellate law and a career appellate lawyer. I've been doing appellate law my entire life. It feels like a whole life. Started in the DA's office in Dallas doing criminal work, and did a stint in Washington, D.C. thanks to my lovely wife, and got back to Texas as quick as I could. I was the justice on the Dallas Court of Appeals, was elected at the same time Justice Kelly was. And we also in Dallas flipped our court to majority Democrat overnight. And we saw the results of that change immediately. We had, bar members did studies of the courts, and I think this goes for the Austin Court of Appeals as well. Overnight, you saw decisions in the appellate courts that were predominantly going for big money interests go to 50-50, which is where I think it ought to be, which is where I think Democrats come in, and why it matters to have Democrats in your elected judiciary here in Texas.
Very, very good. Thank you, sir. The remaining 3 subjects of today's podcast are returning to Progress Texas podcast, 3 of whom we really enjoy their company. Are glad to have them back. Let's start here with Justice Maggie Ellis. Hi, Maggie.
Hi, Chris. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm a huge fan of Progress Texas, so it's great to be here with you this afternoon. So I'm Justice Maggie Ellis. I currently serve on the Third Court of Appeals with Justice Chari Kelly. I came to this role from a completely different perspective. I survived a childhood of homeless, transients. I was left at a gas station when I was 11 years old with $5. I'm the only one of my 8 siblings to ever attend a university or graduate from college. I was a public school teacher, and then I am a foster mom. And then I went to law school so I could advocate for children and families who were like me and my siblings. I was also a prosecutor at the DA's office with Justice Kelly and with Holly Taylor at the same time. And then I was appointed as an administrative law judge. I have been in-house counsel for a county department with almost 500 employees. So I bring very well-rounded experience to this seat, but I also bring a lived understanding of what so many people who've come before the court have experienced. It's a voice that we don't have and we have never had on the Supreme Court. I'm also hoping to be the first female Chief Justice elected to this seat.
Also returning, I think, Holly's been on how many times now? This is probably at least fourth or fifth time that we've had Holly Taylor on. Holly is running for that other court, which is the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. Holly, you almost need no introduction around here, but go ahead and give us one.
Chris, I'm so excited to be here again. And I also, like Justice Ellis, I'm a regular Progress Texas listener. I look forward to learning about the news every day from you. And I am running for that other second Supreme Court that nobody's ever heard of, the Court of Criminal Appeals. And even though they haven't heard of it as the top criminal court in the state, it's setting precedent every day that impacts our rights and freedoms as Texans. So it's super important. And I'm also a nerd. I'm board certified in criminal appellate law. I've been doing criminal justice work for over 25 years. I'm a criminal defense attorney now, but I spent over 17 years as a prosecutor. And I've also fought government corruption. So that's me in a nutshell.
Thank you, Holly. And also returning is Judge Christine Weems, who is, as I mentioned earlier, the one of the five guests today who is not running for either of these courts, but she did run for the Texas Supreme Court last time, is currently running for her reelection to her current seat. So, Judge Weems, tell us what you've got going on there.
Hi, thank you again for having me back. I really appreciate it. Clearly, one of these things is not like the other because I been there, did what y'all did last cycle. Would love to attempt it again, but right now I've got to run to keep my day job in the 281st Civil Judicial District Court in Harris County. Just real quickly, I'm double board certified in PI, trial law, civil trial law, and I'm happy here to lend my moral support to my colleagues who are running statewide judicially because I know how much fun it is, but also to help out provide any perspective that I can after last cycle where we worked hard, we put it out there, we were very optimistic about how 2024 would turn out, and it just they weren't ready to have Democrats win statewide, even though it still hadn't happened in over 30 years. So I'm cautiously optimistic again that these individuals on this call, as well as all of our other fabulous statewide candidates, will be able to make a dent in this state this cycle. So thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. We're glad to have you here. And of course, it's kind of night and day between 2024 and 2026 for Texas Democrats. It would appear anyway. Let's not, speak too terribly soon. But the effects of the Trump administration, things that they've done since the second Trump term began, lots of other things, the economy, all sorts of different factors that seem to be pointing things in a hopeful direction. Of course, we shall see. It all remains to be seen. I want to go on here to what we normally do when we start talking about these courts, which is what the hell are these courts? What the hell do they do? I want to start with Cory Carlyle here as we move into give me a little bit on the specific role, in your case, the Texas Supreme Court. What does the Supreme Court do, and how do you hope to redirect what they've been doing should you win this office?
Sure. The Texas Supreme Court is a court like many of the high courts in the country, in state high courts around the country, that gets to pick and choose its cases. And so that court uses what they call a conveyor belt system. When someone who is dissatisfied with an intermediate court of appeals decision, the first level of appeal after your trial, they get to ask the Supreme Court, or they have to ask the Supreme Court to take their case. And so that's the lion's share of the work of the Supreme Court, evaluating what we call these petitions, and trying to figure out whether the legal issue, any potential error in the Court of Appeals opinion, is significant enough to merit the court's precious time. There's only so much time in the year for the justices to work through the cases. Secondarily, you have a mandamus docket, which is just really a fancy legal word for hurry up and make a quick decision on a limited record at a time in the case that isn't a normal time when we get to an appeal. And so the court spends an amount of time doing these mandamus cases as well, particularly around this time of year when the elections lawsuits are hot and heavy. I don't think any of us was having to deal with one of those this time, though I'm sure in just about every county we live in, there's been folks who've been doing that. And those election ones fast-tracked to the Supreme Court. So their work is sort of seasonal. It's up and down across the year, and that's part of the up for right now for the Texas Supreme Court. But all in all, that's the court that tells us what Texas law is.
Very good. Over to you, Maggie. Maggie Ellis, give us your take on the direction of late of the Texas Supreme Court and how you hope to change that.
Well, I'm concerned with the direction that the Supreme Court has taken. They've issued orders recently. October 24th, they issued orders that it was not a violation of the canons of judicial conduct for a judge who refused to perform a marriage based on a deeply held religious belief. To be clear, the authority for these judges to perform these civil ceremonies it's provided to them by statute. And so that is very concerning. It feels like an attack on the LGBT community, but it also extends to other marginalized communities. A judge could refuse, purportedly based on a deeply held religious belief, to refuse to perform a marriage for an interracial couple, a couple of color, a Jewish couple, a Muslim couple. I find that to be concerning. I feel like it was a problem in search of a solution. Also, recently, in the last couple of weeks, the Supreme Court has issued orders that divorcing us from the accreditation of the American Bar Association. I find that to be very concerning. My concern is that it is an attempt to discredit law schools, good law schools who might have DEI initiatives. I'm also generally concerned that overall, our Supreme Court tends to favor corporations 90% over individuals. And so my direction would be to bring balance back to our courts, bring independence back to our courts, and then, as an aside, also to expand our access to justice initiatives, which is within the purview of the Chief Justice. The Chief Justice is uniquely situated to expand these programs and bring balance to courts throughout the state.
Over to you, Chari Kelly. Tell us your impressions. Similar question. How would you like to see the Texas Supreme Court take a new direction?
Sure. We all remember high school and the three branches of government, right? And how the three branches of government are checks and balances on each other. What we're seeing in Texas is what we're seeing nationwide, right? What we're seeing with the Supreme Court of the United States, because for 20 plus years, the governor has hand selected most of the members of the Texas Supreme Court, a governor, I will say, including the current governor. 7 out of the 9 justices were hand selected by the governor, and he tends to pick a certain type of person who aligns with his belief system. And that's not a check and balance to our system. That's not going through and giving this extra review, right, that we should have, particularly on constitutional matters. So that's very concerning to me. The culture there, like I used the word before, how homogenous it is. Right now, out of the 9 sitting justices, 7 of them received their start by being appointed by Governor Abbott. And I just think that type of system has to change. Now, some of them have been elected, some of them have not, but that's just been the pipeline. And that's not how we select our judges for every other court in the state of Texas. So why shouldn't this be different? And I think we have a unique opportunity as Democrats that I think the courts will be the first thing to flip, because people, may just do may do Senate and then skip out and not feel like they want to dive into the statewide courts. So I have thought that for a long time.
It's important to note that these are all of these are statewide. Everyone in the state is going to have these 5 folks, or these 4 of them are going to be on your ballot coming up real soon, either in the primary, and or in November. The makeup of these courts is, perhaps, one of the most clear indicators of what happens when one party rules the show for decades upon decades. Change is definitely overdue. I think we would all agree. Moving on to Holly Taylor, who's running for that other court, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. Holly, talk about how the direction of that court needs to change.
Well, so, we talked about how important the court is and how it's setting precedent, just like the Texas Supreme Court is. But this court is defining precedent on critical issues like First Amendment right to free speech and due process rights and separation of powers. So important in setting good precedent and being faithful to the Constitution and the rule of law. One of the things that we've talked about before is that Ken Paxton took a particular interest in this court last year in the primaries in 2024. And it was based on a decision that the court had made where 8 of 9 judges on the court, who of course were all Republican, voted that the Attorney General in Texas, based on language that's been in our Texas Constitution since the 1800s, did not have authority under that Constitution to independently prosecute people for election fraud. That the Attorney General has to be invited in by the locally elected prosecutor, elected by the people of that area. And Paxton was unhappy with that decision, and a PAC was formed, and they backed opponents to the incumbents that were running for reelection in 2024. And those Paxton-backed candidates won in the primary. So those 3 are sitting on the court, and Mr. Paxton declared his intent, I think, to remove all 8 of the 9 judges on the court that voted against him. Only 1 judge voted on with his preferred side. So that is kind of what's going on behind the scenes with the Court of Criminal Appeals. And it's sad because really, I think that criminal justice should not be a partisan issue. Politics should not play a role in the court's decision-making.
Agreed. Christine Weems, again, the one of the 5 who's not currently running for either one of these courts, but did last cycle. But you still clearly have a perspective on, both of these courts in the direction that they've been going as of late. What sort of change would you like to see these candidates, what kind of impact would you like to see them have?
Well, I agree with a lot of my colleagues and what they've said here. The biggest thing that we could do is diversity and giving more voters, a right to have some impact. Particularly on the Supreme Court, like one of my colleagues had mentioned, most of them started off as appointments. The Republicans have been notorious for if someone's coming to the end of their term. They've done it this cycle. Someone's coming to the end of their term. Instead of writing it out to the very end, they choose to resign early. And that way, Abbott gets the appointment, and that person who literally just jumped on the court can technically run as the incumbent. So they never do one of those, I'm not going to run again at the end of this term. They intentionally do that. So there's always going to be a Republican incumbent in this seat. I will say this from what we saw in 2024. I was pleasantly surprised to learn, particularly in the general, that the court system is where I think people are willing to look at both sides. And people who are more moderate are willing to look at it not as a partisan issue, but I think we're seeing more than ever the importance of the judiciary, how the judges are basically the last stand, particularly in the high courts, right? In terms of following law. And so I think more and more people are understanding, particularly in these times, about how important it is to have a judiciary that is independent, that is fair, that is thoughtful. I think we're kind of seeing it federally when you hear every once in a while. It's sad that we are applauding when a federally Republican appointed judge follows the law and does what's right? And we're like, oh my God, who knew? But I think when it's sad that we have that kind of opinion, but I think what that is telling is that when you have the right judges in office, it doesn't matter what party they are affiliated with. the right judges will do the right thing, right? And so we kind of saw that in 2024. The problem is that just not enough of the voters understand the judges, understand that our job, even though we have to run on a partisan ballot, is not a partisan job.
Right.
If we can send that message to the voters that regardless of party, look at the qualifications, look at these people who are running, and are they going to do what's right, what's fair, and not because they're beholden to one side or the other. And I've seen, I've heard, I've learned that our progressive judges are more willing to do what's right regardless of partisan politics and follow the law. And I think if we can spread that message to more voters, we have a shot of making an impact. I think someone said it. I think it might have been you, Chris. Where the change is going to happen first, it's going to happen in the judiciary, because most people understand it doesn't have to be partisan. It doesn't have to be a R or a D. You want to find the person who's most qualified, who's going to follow the law and do what's right.
Right. I'm pretty sure that was Chari who said that, actually, but I totally agree.
Sorry.
For sure. No, totally agree. And so let's drill down just a little bit closer to actually what we're talking about. Obviously these are elections. We're talking about replacing individual people who have been doing this job with folks who these candidates believe that believe themselves to be better qualified and to do a better job, in much the way that we've been talking about with Judge Weems there. My personal take is that a lot of Republican office holders tend to come from this idea that they have kind of unlimited power. They haven't really taken competition very seriously, and so they kind of feel like they can do whatever they want to do. And so thus, we run into the problem that Judge Weems was just talking about, judges that kind of follow their own sort of moral code, or that of their party, or that of their governor, or that of their president, rather than actually following the law and doing the right thing. And so that's the type of change that we'd like to see happen. So let's drill down a bit more and talk about specific opponents here, Republican opponents, of course. Maggie, Ellis, we're going to start with you. Talk about the person sitting in that seat right now and why it needs to be you instead.
So currently it's Jimmy Blacklock, who is the Chief Justice of the Texas Supreme Court. And as Justice Kelly mentioned earlier, he is an Abbott appointee. When he was at the Attorney General's office, he voted, for example, in favor of anything that Abbott wanted him to. I mean, so we're talking about cases involving voter ID laws, gerrymandering, voted in favor of voter ID laws, in favor of gerrymandering, anti-women's rights, anti-LGBT rights. Those are very, very conservative rulings and conservative takes. There's no balance there. And again, since he has been appointed, he was appointed in January of this year. So as Judge Weems said, he is the quote incumbent because, he was appointed. He is these recent rulings, these orders that have come from the Supreme Court have been under his purview. And so I just believe that we don't have balance with him on the court. We don't have independence. We don't have the steadiness that we absolutely need. It is critical, especially right now with, we're seeing all across the country, across the state, due process flying out the window, our separation of powers eroding, decades of civil rights protections are also going out the window. And so I think that we need somebody who will bring, because I believe deeply that our courts should be steady, independent, and grounded in the rule of law. And so I will bring that to this court. I will bring my, handled thousands of matters in the court. I'm the only female attorney out of 108,000 attorneys in the state I'm state board certified in juvenile and nationally certified in child welfare law. And again, that is a voice that has not been represented on the court. So I hope to bring that perspective and also bring balance back to the court.
Very good. Chari Kelly, your turn. Tell us about your incumbent that you're facing.
Sure. I'm running for place 2, which is against the incumbent, as we've been saying, James Sullivan. He's not the most recent appointee, but he's close. So he was appointed last January to the Texas Supreme Court. Like so many who've come before him, he was the personal general counsel to Greg Abbott. So he was his personal lawyer, just like Jimmy Blacklock served in that position, just like prior justices who are no longer on the court. And he used to help with the selection process for judges across the state for the governor. So he's intimately familiar with what the governor's, hopes and expectations are. So he's never been elected to a position before, has not served on the court very much. Oh, my 2-year-old daughter's. Hello.
So we have understood that there is a Cinderella that is lurking about.
There is. Yes, I'm a mom, if that wasn't obvious already. But I'm running because, quite frankly, I think we need more experience for a place to. I've been justice for 7 years. As I mentioned earlier, I'm board certified in judicial administration, one of a few judges in the state, actually, one of 19 that is board certified in that area. I've been a judge for 7 years. I've issued over 800 opinions. I've decided constitutional matters before. Fun fact, my court, the Third Court of Appeals based in Austin, used to handle everything involving state agencies, and the legislature created a new court. So we wouldn't handle that. And when asked why, the governor explained in a podcast for the Texas Public Policy Foundation, or a presentation, that it was so the liberal justices of the Third Court of Appeals wouldn't be handling these important matters. So that's what he thinks of our court and of me, apparently. But, I think we need more experience. I think we need a bigger depth of experience. Like I said, I'm a veteran. I just bring a lot more to the table than I think the person that the governor has hand selected to fill this role. And he's also part of the culture that we've all been talking about, part of this new culture of the court. He's signing off on some of these rules and orders, just like the others are. And it's time for a change.
Thank you so much. Cory, Carlyle, your turn. Talk about your opponent sitting in the court right now.
Sure. I'm also running against Chief Justice Jimmy Blacklock, appointed. He's the governor's fixer in his life before this role. And that's, I think, like you hear us all saying, the role that he sort of has remained in. I think it's probably intellectually difficult for someone to even step out of that role, particularly when you feel as an appointee that perhaps you owe that governor, perhaps you owe the others who helped you come up through the ranks and brought you, through what we're now seeing is an extraordinarily partisan attorney general's office to the rank of the highest judge in Texas. It's hard to shed that intellectual blanket that's wrapped around them on the way up. You see his experience. Maggie laid that out. But one thing that I think is interesting too, we talked about that redistricting decision that came out of Texas about the courts, and there was a dissent written by one of the justices, which is I'll just say was probably the most intemperate written appellate opinion that I've seen on the bench, and I've seen some doozies. It was written by a guy, Jerry Smith, on the Fifth Circuit, and just so happens that the current Chief Justice clerked for Jerry Smith when he was a baby lawyer. And so it's this intellectual pig pen that these people come out of. It started in 1980 with the Federalist Society, and it's culminated in incredibly successfully in federal appointments and places like our court, our Supreme Court here in Texas. And it's time for us to stop that. Here's the deal. I've spent 6 years on the Dallas Court of Appeals. We're writing opinions all the time. As people know, we handle about, each of us, we're on about 200 plus cases per year. You end up writing 1/3 of those. So, over 6 years, that's a lot of cases that come through a court. And I feel like I've seen a decent amount. Ideally, neither one of us would be running for this bench right now. Ideally, someone who had served on the court before could ascend to the rank of Chief Justice. But as Democrats, that's not where we're at. We have to get in there and we have to make change on the fly. And I think we're going to do that. I testified against the 15th Court of Appeals in the legislature. I was part of a group of justices, including the current chief of the Austin Court, Chief Justice Byrne, a fantastic Democrat. And, What struck me most was just the total indifference of the Republicans, including the bill sponsor, as we testified, and total indifference in the face of what they knew was a complete lack of data to actually support creating an entire new intermediate appellate court in Texas, where now all of us Texans are paying for the salaries of these new justices. They're going to add justices. And by the way, we had a very competent court in Austin with some pretty smart justices who were doing great work, who the data actually showed weren't reversed at any higher rate than any other court in Texas on any other type of case. And so this is the kind of stuff we've had to get used to, the kind of stuff we've had to deal with from Republicans day in and day out. I'm board certified in civil appellate law. Texas Supreme Court does civil appeals. Current Chief Justice and I got barred on the same day back in 2005. And I think it's time for us as Democrats to bring the type of middle of the road judging that we are known for bringing to the state, to stop what we all know is the hard rightward shift embodied by folks like the Federalist Society types like Chief Justice Jimmy Blacklock. It's time for that rightward lean to go, and it's time for us to make change.
Very, very good. I'm going to be stealing that intellectual pigpen thing. That's great. Over to Holly Taylor, who a little bit of a different situation, not technically an incumbent. Talk about that.
Sure. I think one of the things that we talked about, Chris, before is that I'm actually running for what's going to be an open seat, because the judge that holds this seat, who I would consider to be a moderate and has written, some strong decisions for the court, is being has primary opponents. So there's a couple of people running against each other in the primary. And so, I think that it's really critical that we have judges on this court in particular that have the kind of perspective that I've gained from the work that I've done. So I've spent over 17 years as a prosecutor, and I've prosecuted violent crime, working to keep my community safe, stand up for victims. But then most recently, for about 5 years, I've been working with the Conviction Integrity Unit in Travis County. And that's the part of the Travis County government that investigates wrongful conviction claims and works to exonerate innocent people. And with that perspective, as a prosecutor, when I first went into it, I expected that we wouldn't really have too many wrongful convictions in our county, because I felt like we'd been working to do justice. We'd been working very hard to keep our community safe and certainly trying to be fair. But through this work, DNA testing, scientific review, et cetera, I learned that I'm wrong. In fact, we did have wrongful convictions in our county. And what really struck me to the core, and I would consider it pretty transformational for me, is that I learned that a few of the cases that I had originally prosecuted as an appellate prosecutor were in fact wrongful convictions. And I worked so hard to ensure, with my team, to ensure that justice was done in those cases, and that those people didn't serve any more time for crimes they did not commit. But through that process, I learned that we have cracks in the foundation of our criminal justice system. And it is really critical that we have judges on the court who understand that the system can fail, and the courage that it takes to do the right thing, to make decisions based on the rule of law and the Constitution and the facts and science, and not based on politics. So I think that's what's really critical for this court, especially.
Well, what you hear there to me is a refreshing perspective that you are very, very unlikely to hear from any Republican official at all, ever admitting any fault at all for anything at all that needs to be corrected. That's just not going to happen anymore. So, guys, this has been a terrific talk. I do want to go to Judge Weems, and Judge Weems, I'm going to let you have the final word here. Give us your perspective on why this is so important, why it's so important for our listeners to pay attention to what's happening with these two courts and all of these candidates and all the other candidates that are running for these very important seats. And also give us a little bit about your reelection run that you're engaged in there in the Houston area.
Well, so I'm a trial court judge in in Houston, in Harris County. It's a statewide election. I only handle civil matters, so no probate, no family law, no criminal work. But the way I always point it out to people is when we talk about experience, I mean, every case, when it goes up to the Supreme Court or the Court of Criminal Appeals, they almost always start at the trial court level. And so that's why it's important to get a qualified judiciary all the way up and down when you're talking about in the trial courts, but also in the intermediate appellate courts, as well as the Court of Criminal Appeals and then the Texas Supreme Court. I cannot emphasize enough how important it is for voters to really pay attention, because we constantly see it. We saw it in 2024. We're still seeing it now in the first year of Trump's term, that people see what the federal Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court does, and they get mad and they get upset. And they're like, oh, but this is Trump. This is what Trump did. And what they don't realize in the state of Texas, that they have a voice in deciding who is going to be on that top court, right? I mean, they get elected. That means voters don't really recognize, and I don't think it really clocks into them, that when they go vote in March, when they go vote in November, that on average, you're going to be able to turn over 1/3 of that court. At least 1/3 of both of the top two courts are on the ballot every presidential cycle and every midterm cycle, right? And so what I heard over and over again is like, oh, what is the point? Like, we can't change it, right? If it's going to be a 1/3 or even 4 seats, it doesn't change. We don't get a majority. We can't make change, but it has to start somewhere. Right? Yeah, we're not going to be able to sweep all 9 overnight and make a dramatic change. But what's going to be really important is just even by changing 1/3 of the court, even by having a different voice on those courts, to be able to write the dissents, to be able to give that really reasoned legal argument from that perspective in writing, it gives future lawyers and future judges, right, legal support to make their arguments in the future, even if it wasn't the majority. There is some way to say, you know what, the dissent in this case said that, and maybe we need to look at that as to what we can argue and utilize here, use it as guidance for the future. So that's why it matters. And so voters need to remember, every time you get mad about what our U.S. Supreme Court does, right, which seems to happen a lot lately, then think about, well, you know what, we may not be able to do much there, but we can do something here in Texas. And that is why it's important that they don't just go to the polls and vote for governor or vote for Senate and go, well, I don't know anything about any of these judges, so I'm done. It's important to do your research and to make an informed vote, right? Because when you do that, we actually have a shot, maybe not in overturning the entire court this cycle, but we can start that process where we can get a majority on both of these courts within a very short 6 years.
That's right. And make no mistake, any of the folks on the call winning would be, one of the first statewide Democrat wins in decades in Texas. So that would in itself would be huge. Holly, you had one more thing you want to say?
Yeah, we actually have an unprecedented opportunity in 2026. There are going to be a total of 10 statewide judicial seats, all of which are absolutely critical, not only to our judiciary, but to our democracy on the ballot. And Texas voters are going to have the opportunity to pick the judges to sit in those seats who are going to stand up for the rule of law. It's an incredible opportunity for us here in Texas.
Very, very good and agreed. And we always love when we start messing around with court stuff, because that means we have really, really smart people coming on the podcast, making us feel even more smart than we were before. So Chari Kelly and Cory Carlyle and Maggie Ellis and Holly Taylor and Christine Weems, we appreciate the time very, very much today. And everybody be safe out there on the campaign trail. We appreciate you.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Absolutely. Progress Texas is an independent, nonprofit, rapid response media organization. While campaigns come and go, we're the permanent home for progressive media in action in the Lone Star State. I'm Chris Mosier. We are out. We'll catch you again next time.